Greetings and welcome to the Prismatic Congress, a broadcast by the Prismatic Imperium based in Cubio, an active player group that makes up part of the Ashling Deval community and specializes in roleplay. I am Mr. Lord Warden for the branch of Vigor, and it is Sunday, the 19th of April, 2100 hours, damn, summertime. There's been more developments. We haven't had a Congress last week, so because it was the Easter holidays. But that gives us even more updated news to talk about. We have been talking a lot about fleet carriers in the last episode, and we will surely pick this up today because we have the first set of feedback reaction changes that we will go through later in the discussion section. But first, let us cover the usual part of branch news, and we will, as always, start with the branch of Vigor. In terms of BGS news for Branch of Vigor, there's nothing new to say other than the usual. Check our mission boards if you are interested. There's always something to do there, or just don't hesitate to ask questions in our dedicated channels. Another thing I would like to talk about for a little bit here is the updates on the Vigor roleplay arc. While roleplay is usually mind stuff, this is pretty much involving players from the Branch of Vigor and all the story we've been building throughout the last months. And I can say that it is finally about to come to a close. And I would expect my character to get out of prison in the coming week. There's a special roleplay mission still going on currently. We have seen 4 chapters played throughout the last week. And for this, I wanted to try something that I don't think we've seen in the Prismatic Imperium roleplay before, which is it's telling the story and this mission from 4 different angles. So we've seen 4 chapters that all tell parts of this ongoing story from a different perspective, and that allowed me and also Kevin to focus on telling the story from more narrow sets and focusing on individual players and characters and what they experience as part of the mission, instead of having the entire thing in one big session where everyone is required and it will be chaotic. I wanted to try this, and I think so far I'm very happy with how this worked out, and I hope everyone who participated in it also enjoyed that. And yeah, if you are interested in following up on that, keep your eyes on it. I guess at least this core arc of the Vigor Fall will come to a close yet now very soon. And with this, let me hand over to my dear Lord Headmaster colleague for the branch of Sight.
Greetings. It is I, your favorite Lord Headmaster, from the branch of Sight. Oh boy, a lot has happened over the last 2 weeks. I don't even know where to start. Some of these topics might be better for the asking round later, or even in general discussion, because they're a bit long. But just let me start with a simple overview of what happened. I had a lot of time to try out the fleet carriers, especially when it comes to site loadouts, exploration stuff. And I'm sure we'll talk later about this. But what I'd like to mention is that before this update came, it was actually pretty useless as for an exploration vessel. But now it might be even a mobile base for long-term exploration missions. I've tried to test it and I've looked into every single thing. I'm sure we'll talk later about this. And I've also had an idea for what we could use our other fleet carriers regarding not only for sight, but also for mind or Vigor activities. In relation to this topic, I released a survey today. I asked people about a good time for the next exploration trip, and most of them answered with they'd like to have the next exploration event after the fleet carrier release, which will be in June. That means, for now, I'll only consider small branch activities regarding exploration trips, but will focus on other stuff, background work, as well as possible side roleplay coming in May. Another thing that is currently in development are the side news articles from the show The Side Relay. I've started to write some articles, and with the approval of Kevin, they'll hopefully be posted soon. Of course, they're just in their beginning phase yet, and they need a lot of correction. But I'm sure after all of this is done, you will enjoy the new counter vector measurement. Another thing that's very important for me. Over the last 2 weeks, Drew Varga's lore tour started. I was able to come by and follow him on these interesting tours through the history of the Elite Universe so far. We've had Sol, Tau Ceti, and Arcana last week. And I have to say, this is a great format, and I can't wait to take part in the other coming lore tour stops. But did you actually know that this lore tour is split up in 2 parts? The first part being the main expedition, and the second part going outside the bubble, which will focus on Operation Dynasty. You know, the settlements far away that actually have a lot to do with the Fargoid and Ruxler conspiracy. And I had an idea. I reached out to Drew Varga and stated him a possible idea of mine if he would be interested in using our future fleet carrier, my future fleet carrier, as a mobile base for this long-term exploration trip in his other roleplay tours hopes. And possibly this will happen. I'm looking forward to, because this would be a great way to not only advertise the Prismatic Imperium, but also have one of the greatest influencers and authors on our side. It would be also really interesting, because jumping around with Drew Varga on board, who knows what interesting conversations might get out of this. And if it's really going to happen, I'd like to make it one hell of an event for the entire PI to come by with and enjoy. Alright then. I know this was a lot, but I'm finally done now. You can now enjoy the beautiful voice of the one and only Kevin Macy.
Hello and thank you. It is I, Kevin Massey, the Lord Herald, and I have quite a bit of new stuff to discuss with the Branch of Mind. And so, starting off, I think I'll just jump in and say I'm really enjoying the Feast of Fools this month, so much so that it's taking up about the entire month as opposed to the first week or two. So, that's great. That's just more festival, more fun things to do, more games. And I have hoped you are getting your enjoyment out of the what's it called? Give me a moment. Yes, thank you. The Lord Herald's game. I couldn't find it, and I was trying to think, what is that called? Yeah, so go ahead and cut that out. So I hope you're enjoying the Lord Herald's game, which is something that is going to be only available during the duration of the Feast of Fools, and after that, it will be gone. So basically, if you're not currently invested in anything, you can invest in that, and at the end of the next hour or the current hour, it will you'll get your diamonds back. Hopefully, more than what you started with. So take advantage of that. Anyway, moving on. I hope you've been enjoying the role play related to the Feast of Fools. It's really an angle that I haven't had to approach before. Usually, our worst villains just we learn about it through news. What happens? They go through the Feast of Fools. They're crowned the king, and then at the end of the feast, they're executed when they're turned to the crowd. And that's all we really know. I haven't really gone over the specific details, but I'm really referencing some of the early inspirations for the Feast of Fools the fact that it was actually inspired by an entry in the Dishonored franchise. There's like a book that will tell you about the day that does not exist, and so essentially it's inspired by that. And so it's more or less a day where anything can happen. Small crimes are ignored, and people are they're just insane. So that takes place usually on a Friday, the last day of the Feast of Fools. I don't know what that day will look like this year, since we're doing something special with it. But that is usually how it will play out, and I will take effort to include all of that information in articles, the daily articles that post for next year. So, moving on from the Feast of Fools, I want to go over some of the new stuff that's on the diamond market. So first of all, there's two new careers. There's the Overseer career and the Prismatic military career. And all of the gear related to that is slowly being added to the market. So looking at the Overseer career, I have included the Conservation of the Overseer, which is an armor, the Concealment of the Overseer, which is a cape that's optional, the Abrupt Force of the Overseer, which is a wrist guard that also includes a force burst in it. So same instrument as before. You can launch foes away from you if they get too close. Really good for trying to evade melee guys. And then there's the Discriminating Veil of the Overseer, which is a helmet, the Trampling Boots of the Overseer, which are boots, and the Burst Shield of the Overseer, which is a burst shield that is very similar to the Prismatic Soldier version. I won't go over the stuff that I added for the military career, since I've already done that in another episode. But I do want to discuss some planned items for both of these careers. Planned items for the Overseers is the Overseer Baton. I don't have any special names for these planned items yet, but I do want a melee weapon for the Overseers that is non-lethal, so you'll have the baton available. There'll also be an Overseer uniform and whatever else comes with that. That is different than the Overseer armor because it is made for not when you're going out into combat or on the field. And something to progress further with if you're doing the Overseer career. Next, I want to do some Overseer non-lethal weapons for just each of the classes if possible, at least the medium. There is something for the light, so I don't know if I'll add anything further for that. I do want to add an Overseer car, just something that is not the Overseer van, which I realize I'm saying Overseer a lot, but that's kind of the nature of the administration of the Overseer. So I'd also want to add uniform boots. If anyone is interested, they can purchase these boots. They will probably be available for anyone to purchase. I haven't decided yet. I'd like some feedback on that. But it is something that can go with any of the uniforms if you are pledged to a branch. Otherwise, it might be another component that is awarded with the uniforms. And it'll just be one set of boots for all the branches, so it's just one item. Other items I want to add is the Reaver Shield and the Reaver Ebony Armor, as well as an exosuit for light and heavy. Just so you're aware, all of these items will severely limit your mobility. So only be interested in that if you're going to become a complete tank and you're going to be soaking up all of the attacks, because you will not be moving in a hurry if you have all of that gear for the roleplay. And then just a few planned items for the Prismatic Soldier career. I want to do some heavy armor, some sniper gear, mechanic gear, and scout gear. And so that should cover all the bases. And that wraps up for Branch of Mind news.
Thank you. Let's go to follow-up. Do you want to say any follow-up words on Vigor?
I definitely have a lot I want to talk about with Vigor, but that would be great for after we do an open discussion.
All right, we can do that. I love that Techie had a lot of news for the branch of sight, and that these plans for the fleet carrier and also including Jurega sounds really awesome. So I'm happy to hear that. Something that I would like to hear a few more words about from is Kevin about the new career paths for Vigor. For the military and the overseers.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think that's a very cool idea that you through items basically offer a new kind of career path that you can follow, where you can just unlock stylish gear that you can make use of. What I would like to hear your follow-up words on is the topic of differentiating between all the let me call them military factions that we have. We have the branch of Vigor, we have the administration of the overseer, and we have the prismatic military. So in one sentence, what kind of person in character would want to join what, and why would you want to join one of them? How would you choose?
If
Just to make
if,
it clear for anybody who listens to what the difference between these factions is, because I think that can
right,
vary, especially if you're new.
the overseers are only interested in imperial affairs for the greater good. They're not specific to any factions within. So they are not Prismatic Imperium. So if you're interested in just like carrying on a Imperial Navy career, you would go right there to the Overseers. For the Prismatic military, that is the private army of our leader, Duke Corin Ryan of the Prismatic Imperium. And that is the military that operates for the Prismatic Imperium. Whether it be here on Kibio or other planets, battling, whatever. It's the army. And then for the branch of Vigor is specifically the enforcers of the Prismatic Imperium on a more domesticated level. So they are more like the police. So I think that is the simplest way I can explain all those, just off the top of my head.
And basically, everyone who does a roleplay now has options to choose a career path like that if they want to, and make contacts in the roleplay and try to unlock more options there.
That's certainly the idea. I know that there was confusion about how far you could progress within the branches, specifically Vigor, through only roleplay means. And this is just really to kind of add to that. If you are invested in the roleplay, say with the branch of Vigor, we said that it's really hard to progress with that in roleplay because it does require in-game works. But if you want to tie it to your roleplay, this is the ability to have gear, specialized items that can be rewarded to you instead of just pure diamonds or reputation, since these are all items you can't purchase.
All right, and I guess the overseer and military paths or career paths are also great options for people who are not or who are pledged to some branch and want to go a more neutral path in the roleplay, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah,
it
I have a lot of
possible?
thinking to do.
Is it possible to have multiple careers running at once?
Yes.
Oh, that sounds great for me then.
Yeah, I mean you're pretty far in the branch of sight, I imagine, and you have also started your military career,
Yeah, I
which
have
I
only
do
to
want
become.
to say I have a lot more thinking to do on these because I don't know exactly what all of this will look like yet in terms
No
of, say,
problem.
scripting usual events to keep you occupied in your careers. I really don't know. This is all a new thing.
Just so you know, I have a huge interest in joining the Overseers.
Oh, good. So you're going to be involved in everything.
Yeah, I'll try my best to not shoot
Yeah,
anybody.
thankfully we're not the Federation, so that sort of corruption and stuff, or being being involved in everything, conflicts of interest, that is all just natural for being a member of the of the Empire. As Otesia said, anytime there's two or more Imperials gathered together, there will be corruption. So, so yeah, I like that.
All right. Sounds good. Let's, if you don't have anything else to bring up, let's head over into Prismatic Discussion.
Prismatic Discussion. Prismatic Discussion.
Well.
Prismatic Discussion.
Do we want to do carriers first or RP first?
Let's go ahead and just get RP out of the way, because carriers, I think, will take a bulk of the conversation. By the way, if you're present here at this time, you can now unmute your mic and join in the discussion.
I tend to always forget to say that, sorry.
Hi, guys.
Hi. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and start then with covering over some of the role play, then, Missler.
Go ahead.
My thoughts on, I mean, it's kind of neat to see someone else doing some of their own diamond managing, as I like to call it, DMing, or as you might be more familiar with, GM. It's been really fun to see Missler's new approach, where he's really rewinding the clock to have a new perspective. It isn't the way that I would generally do it, just because I'm more comfortable with the chaos happening and jumping straight through things. But it is a neat approach to see. And even having played through it and been a part of it, I would still use my own style. But every DM can use their own style. So I really like that, and it's been fun having that ability to co-op on the story.
It's certainly not something I'd want to do regularly, because it requires a lot of additional planning and keeping track of the timelines and whatnot. But I wanted to give this a try, and I think it has its own advantages in handling it.
Yeah, it's certainly a style. Did anyone else have any comments on how that worked through, if you read through it?
I'm still catching up on all the different RP channels. There's absolutely tons for me to trawl through.
It's
Yeah.
entertaining. I like it.
But
I know
I've been trying to glean as much as I can, and so that I can sort of be clued up in real life, but my character's still not to be clued up. So I'm sort of trying to work the way so that everything all gels nicely with like everybody else's RP.
As far as the Vigor arc is concerned, I will, of course, also, as soon as this current mission is over, make sure that the summary on our website is updated.
I did forget to mention that I changed the way utilities work. So I was able to pull all the data that the bot would post whenever you used an item in roleplay. And so that is now available. And I am really trying to enforce in any roleplay that anyone does, if they use a utility item, anything that has a notes button attached to it that you can publicly see and click on, I want you to use it, please. And so currently that is extended to utilities. So, and that came up today, in fact. But it also comes up in the roleplay that I was managing in the Vigor story arc. And that's when, if you use something like, say, the encryption cracking unit, you'll click on notes and you'll see a lot of text come up. Those are things for you to copy and paste from. But it's all asking for you to do a dice roll. And so please do a dice roll in the RP discussion channel so everyone can see it, and then paste the code that is specific to the range that you rolled, so we can find out if you succeeded or if you failed, because it's really nice to be able to have the opportunity for things to fail. With that, I also wanted to jump out and remind you about something we had discussed with Adriel in a previous session, was you'd be careful not to power game. Always give an opportunity for others to respond to your actions. So that about covers that. If you have any questions of that, let me know.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the notes thing on the items. I did have a look around, and I asked Ramirez if like where I could find the actual notes thing, because I've been looking in the inventory section and it just says open notes, but the actual message doesn't have a button to click to give me the instructions.
That is definitely something that would be a feature request for Mistler. Something that would be really neat to see is somehow the ability to see these public notes section when you click on it without leaving your inventory screen, because I know it can be kind of hard to go shopping on the market looking for items you own.
That's actually a thought that occurred to me while you were talking about the utility system just a moment ago. So
Oh, fun.
I'll make sure to add something that you can view these notes to from your inventory.
Yeah, because I was trying to sort of go as much within the RP as I could, but I didn't want to be taking too many liberties. But at the same time, I was like, well, I'm really confused because I can't find the notes anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, that's a fair critique.
So I just sort of winged it with what would be a realistic way of me combining these technologies and doing things?
The notes are a relatively new feature, so I think we've only used them for special items so far, which is why this never came up before. But I absolutely agree with you. It reminds me of originally when I joined this group, we didn't even have the tooltips and everything. So to find out what your item actually is able to do, you had to go to the diamond market and read the description there, which is why I added the tooltip systems, and that was how I got into the website. And it's kind of the same with the notes, something that you should definitely be able to see from your inventory if there's any notes attached.
Right. And with that change where it's no longer being run by the bots, it's easy enough for me to add new utilities. So I will be expanding on some of the things you can do and also keeping within the limit to the ones that currently exist. So I really think that makes it better for when you're trying to decide what exactly do you want to bring, how do you want to equip your character out. But it's kind of neat to see that people are relying less on having a full variety of these utilities, and that's kind of neat because there's a lot of armors that they just, I want to make them more valuable even though they don't have the max possible slots. So with having a whole lot more utilities on the market in the future, that might make it where it's impossible for everyone to be outfitted exactly the same, which is something I am definitely interested in trying to force. Specialized people, please.
Yeah. That's the idea.
So at one point you'd said something about adjusting the prices of legacy items, and a process about doing that. What was that process again?
If a person earns a legacy item, usually because they've proven themselves in roleplay and have discussed with me what they'd want as a special item designed specifically for them, if they become inactive on our server for a long period of time, their legacy item will become available. When that happens, they get a markup price. So let me just, it's hard for me to just do this off the top of my head, but looking at a legacy item, I'd say like Techeron's defense item, the Techeron's shield generator, it's worth 500 diamonds to him now. But if you look down at the current value, that is 1% of its actual true value. So if Techeron were to disappear for whatever reason and his item became available for anyone to purchase, it wouldn't be at 500 diamonds. It would be at, I'm sorry, what is it? 50,000 diamonds. So that's what you'd be paying for. And it is standardized for all legacy items. All legacy items are worth 50,000 diamonds.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that with the Oxroy blade. Is why I was asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about turning. Sorry. Okay, I'm following you now. You want the Oxroy blade to become a legacy item for Malco Oxroy.
I suppose you'd put it that way. Just the value is actually more reflected of its actual value.
Okay. Yeah, we can discuss that. I actually forgot. I'd have to look back and see how we were doing that in the past
It was
because
some
I've
months
forgotten.
ago.
But yes, you're right. It's not worth 50,000 diamonds right now. So we can discuss that. And Actually, it is. It's already 50,000 diamonds.
Currently on a sale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually tied up in a commission right now.
Yeah. That's good.
It's out cutting somebody else to death right at the moment, someplace else. I'm kind of wondering if that'll actually have story implications somewhere down the road, because people will be like, "So there was a murder you committed out in Federation space. That was you, right?"
No, I'm glad you're enjoying that some of the commissions that I'm doing now, where they're actually using items from your inventory, and sometimes very unique items. So obviously that was a commission that only you, Ramirez, could have fulfilled, because you're the only one who has an Oxroy blade, and it is a unique item. And yes, there will be implications further down. I won't say exactly what they are or what capacity that could be, but it does often matter if you see a commission that is not super generic. It probably will play into things. You just have to keep in mind that with the way that our role play runs here, the fact that these are real people that are DMing this with real lives, it takes a very long time to see the fruits of your labor or lack thereof. So just remember, give everything some patience.
Certainly, yeah.
Anything else, or do we want to switch topics and talk about fleet carriers? I take that as a maybe.
It sounds like we're gonna go ahead and move forward then.
Right. Okay, so in the last episode we've been talking about fleet carriers, but that was all before we even had the beta. So we can use the rest of this show today to talk about, well, our first impressions, but also already about the first set of changes that was announced. To quickly go through the big changes they made, there was, after the beta started, a big outcry about the upkeep costs, as those turned out much higher than many people expected, with the weekly upkeep going up to around 150 million per week. And I think the math added up to, if you bought a fleet carrier in the first year and paid the upkeep for one entire year, you'd end up around 14 billion in the first year, and then a running cost every year about 7 billion, which is pretty high. So I can understand there was some outcry, and it looks like Frontier reacted to that and reduced the upkeep cost for all additional services by 80 to 90%. And core running costs were also reduced by 50%. That's a very big number. They say that will be a total of around 85%. The debt threshold for carrier decommissioning was adjusted accordingly, and you should be able to go up to 10 weeks without paying the upkeep if you have difficulties managing the credits for that. Also, upfront activation cost for the services has been reduced. Then there's a noticeable change in the spin-up and cooldown time for the jump of your fleet carrier, which is something we've also talked about in the last episode. It used to be 1 hour spool up and then another hour of a cooldown for you. So effectively allowing you only to jump every 2 hours. And this has been also nerfed dramatically to now 15-minute jump preparation time and another 5 minutes cooldown after that, which basically allows you to jump every 20 minutes. There was also something we mentioned, the outcry about universal cartographics missing, so you cannot sell any exploration data. This has been addressed as well. Similar to bounty vouchers, there will be a cut if you sell exploration data at your carrier, but this will now be possible. And then the tritium fuel was also made at least 2 times more effective as a fuel, which should bring you quite a big deal further when you use your carrier for exploration, in combination with a changed spin up and cooldown time. I'd like to hand over to Techie first, because he already hinted in the news section at plans and reaction to these changes that they announced. So let's start with Techie, and what's your opinion on carriers for exploration now?
Yes, so well, look, before these changes were announced, before the price and everything else dropped, I and basically every one of you here know that we had the plan of getting a fleet carrier per branch. So one for Mind, one for Side, and one for Vigor. But the thing was, after these huge numbers were released, most of you actually weren't able to afford this at all, including me. But now after this change, I've reviewed my original plan and another one came into my mind, one that I've already discussed with the Chancellor, and I'd like to represent this one. So now that fleet carriers are pretty much cheap, and a lot of systems and groups will have one, I thought about this as the following. What if we just not use one per branch, but actually use as many as we need? Fully kitted out fleet carriers that are able to assist us in every kind possible. One taking an exploration trip, another one flying into one of our systems where there's no LPAD to land at. What if we create a fleet carrier network of commanders that are actually going to have one? So these people would basically be able to act and communicate in an own channel on our Discord, announcing jumps, for example, or requesting support lines, having discussions about where fleet carriers actually needed. Something like this. So we could use as many fleet carriers as we need from a lot of people that are going to have one, that are not just branch specific, but actually there for the entire PI, and have a communication center, a fleet carrier ownership network, where the people can actually send them everywhere where they are needed for our faction. This is my idea, after all of that cost reducing and so on. Because now it actually looks like we can use them in every single way possible and not just in a limited one because it's too expensive. That is my idea.
I think you certainly have good points in there. As far as many as we need is concerned, I think this is something that's gonna play out almost on its own, or at least I always expected it to be, because everyone who has the credits and has interest in a fleet carrier would, I expect, buy one. And I would also assume that people in our group are open to offering their carrier service to everybody else.
Yeah, would become
and I assume something like a PI carrier network would be somewhat based on, voluntary offering your services. But I
Yeah.
absolutely enjoy the idea of having a fleet carrier jumping channel or so, where you can quickly discuss with others if there's any options where our carriers needed, or somebody who doesn't have a carrier, if somebody else who owns a carrier could help them out or so. That is definitely a good point. And
I guess they would be a huge advantage for BGS in systems where there's no LPAD, as I've said previously, for example.
Yep. And it might
going
work.
ahead and exploration trips in systems you've never been able to visit before because they were too far away.
I guess that would also work out better than appointing carrier X to be the branch carrier or something like that.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I know I've said it before that I would like to have a carrier that I buy for the branch of Vigor, but even with these changed numbers, which is something that I appreciate a lot, I'm still not entirely sure if I will rush this and buy one for the branch. But
I plan
I think I'll get some at some point, but I'm probably not going to rush it for the release.
I know I won't be able to right
Yep.
off the bat, but I did have a comment if there's room for me here.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I want to say that I'm glad they have been reduced, and one of the reasons for that is because it's pretty clear that a lot of people who couldn't afford a fleet carrier is going to strive to get one, and I think that represents a pretty large number of people, honestly. And the last thing you want is to encourage a lot of players to be doing the sort of grinding mechanics that Frontier would prefer we didn't do, such as burn out our heart and souls into mining or whatever happens to be the most efficient way of bringing in diamonds. I'm sorry, credits.
Well,
And
you
while
see,
it might work for some people, for most people who do that, that is not a very healthy way of keeping people invested in the game long term because of the burnout associated with it. And so I realize Frontier were trying to make something that only 10% of us could utilize, but it's very clear that more than 10% are going to strive for it. Just like when the game first launched, only 10% of people had access to the Anaconda. And everybody was striving for that, doing, whatever Gold Rush means they could.
There's certainly a trend, and people are always aiming for the biggest thing, and that used to be the cutter. I think many people have been through the cutter rush of just, it's the biggest ship, I want that, I need that. And I guess your point is that it's a big chance that they just moved that bar further up.
Yeah.
well, you see, I have a bit of an issue with this one. I've always been the richest person here in the group, and now I'm even richer because I've decided to get some backup money. I'm now sitting at 25 billion for the fleet carrier, and I have to say, I mean, I like the reduction. Even for me, 7 billion per year were a bit too much. But I think the reduction of price is actually a bit too extreme, because firstly, the fleet carriers would, without changing any numbers, if they were to arrive without change, they were probably regarded as the crown of the crown, the special item only a few people can afford, that made them special. But I would have enjoyed a 50% price reduction, but with an 80 to 90% price reduction, the fleet carriers don't feel so special anymore for me. I mean, there are going to be so many now. Every single system in the beta I've seen had one. And now, if this is going to repeat, it just don't makes them special anymore for me. I mean, I'm now sitting at 4,000 hours in Elite, and I'd like to have a bit of a reward in form of owning a fleet carrier that only a few people could possess.
It
But
does
I
sound like the
see-
fleet carriers were kind of maybe just dropped at bad timing when there was no alternatives, nothing else for players to grab onto.
Yeah, I
And
have
it
the
just they
feeling
needed something to throw at us to keep us occupied, and they had that.
with current methods, it's pretty easy to obtain a lot of credits.
I can
As-
certainly
as
agree.
I've done
I'd
it.
like to see them be a lot more expensive than they are. I mean, maybe I don't want to see that, but I wouldn't mind if it
Yeah,
was
same.
more expensive. Money wasn't the thing that bothered me. It was the upkeep. I'm afraid I've said this before, but that seemed like a really dangerous road for Frontier to go into. Introducing that mechanic of punishing for not being actively online.
Well,
And
I
I know a
think
lot of the counter arguments is people don't want a bunch of dead ships floating in space, and I don't understand why they can't just vanish from all instances. Still exist for the players who log in and who are utilizing it, if they were last docked on it, but just not be one of the persistent ones that are appearing in the system. There's a lot of ways I would have approached this before I would have considered using upkeep costs.
I guess there's certainly alternatives like removing them from the system map or so to avoid clutter too. So get the
Right.
point there. I mean, I've been fairly positive about fleet carriers in the last episode, based on solely the initial reveal stream. But yeah, I've also been fairly alright about upkeep. Just because on the stream I saw a 10 million number and I thought, okay, 10 million per week I can live with that. And then they opened the beta and I saw it goes up to 140 just for what I consider is basic for a fleet carrier. I want my fleet carrier to be able to carry my ships. That's why it's called a carrier, and to carry my modules. And just for these two things, I already beat 60 to 70 million upkeep per week. And I think that is pretty ridiculous numbers, considering that even the highest power play rank salary per week does not manage to cover that. And I've always been hoping for fleet carriers to be something that is another piece of utility and support for your own playstyle when you get one.
Right.
You can use it to manage your ships better. You can. It's a helpful thing that supports your gameplay that you do anyway. However, with these enormous upkeep costs that we saw, it was pretty obvious to me that this is not your carrier supporting your normal gameplay. It is you playing to support your fleet carrier, and this is never what I wanted. I don't want to. There was the argument, which I think is pretty stupid, that covering the upkeep for fleet carrier is only 2 hours of mining per week. Yes, that is mathematically probably correct if you min-max mining, but I don't want to spend 2 hours every week. I do not want to commit to this. If there's any upkeep, I want to be able to pay that just by playing the game as I always used to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad they adjusted these numbers. I haven't looked at the complete maths behind the new numbers yet and what the pricings there would be, but I'm pretty happy to see that they generally address that feedback.
Well, with the current numbers, it is estimated that the upkeep cost for a carrier for 1 year is 1.1 billion. That
Sounds much more yen, yeah.
means I could support mine and keep it alive for 20 years. But of course, they said these numbers might change depending on further feedback.
It's certainly likely we'll see the numbers closer to where they are now than where they were when the beta first launched. Just because of the crowd reaction.
I wonder if they intentionally overshot there, or
I don't see
don't
that
really
being
know.
to their benefit. You hear the phrase bad publicity is publicity, any publicity is good publicity. I don't think that's actually true. Bad PR is
Lord Harold.
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely. I can be my own worst critic. No, I don't think Frontier did this intentionally. I think this is just a matter of dropping a feature that it's the only thing they had in reserves that was ready to be launched, and they needed to give the crowd something between now and the next paid expansion. And so I really think this is just a casualty of their good intentions for things that they had cooking up. So I just want to say I'm glad I'm not the one overseeing these sort of decisions.
There's a
But
lot of
that's got to be.
certainly that had to be made, and that I assume Frontier will have a bad time with reiterating.
Yeah.
If TPM were to release fleet carriers, everyone who couldn't afford to keep the upkeep cost alive would probably start to work as a journalist. Oh, pardon. I'd say as a slave journalist.
Intern.
Whatever.
Unpaid.
I mean, what's the difference?
Aha, no, not you again, please.
Melt the topic.
It doesn't matter where you are. Just put the word slave in your mind and he can already smell or read that or whatever. And he's going to prepare a counter argument within a light second. But
Sorry?
just one thing I want to announce. When I have my fleet carrier, it's actually going to request slaves in the commodity market.
What?
What is this heresy?
That sounds like it deserves an audit.
Yeah, that sounds like it deserves a fine.
I'm going to put out an order for Imperial slaves. Yes, and you can't stop me.
There's secretly no upkeep costs. It's just the fines for the carrier of slaves on board text carrier.
I mean, someone has to clean it.
He's been working with some shady characters lately.
Do we still have the confessed slaver role?
Hey,
Yeah, I think
Oh,
it's
technically-
already applied
technically
to
has it.
him.
Okay.
It's not enough. He's open.
I wonder who's going to clean your fleet carrier.
You know, there's somebody here who's currently writing vector articles. Right, Ramirez? You've got it all recorded here.
You heard nothing. You can't prove anything. It's not me. I'm not the real Lord Headmaster. I'm just a hologram saying.
Well, you
things.
better be afraid of the not real Lord Warden, because he's here listening too, and he'll flat out kill you and your slaves.
Which one?
Yeah,
He can try, but
you honest Benjamin.
definitely not.
Okay.
Succeed.
Yeah, that seems like something I'd do.
I'll put an army of slaves against you.
See, I think his march against the High Overseer is misplaced. You've got real enemies here.
No.
At the top of the list is Techeron.
I don't know.
No.
Right now, I've been trying to go after mine, which is going to backfire on me horribly, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please,
Yeah.
do it.
That is actually something you've got my full support in.
That's good to know.
I will have my absolute fun backfiring on this all the time after that.
Come on,
Get a,
involve me somehow, and then it's all and everyone against mine. You need to eradicate the lies.
I'm fine with having all of you guys as enemies. But
It's fun.
yeah, it is. I mean, you can't be mad. I'm just giving the people what they wanted.
But you know, actually, I truly wonder, what is the true popularity rate of the Lord Herald?
I'd imagine it would be pretty high, honestly.
Yeah, but
100%
is-
because only the people who say he's cool are asked.
But still, I want
That
to
is
know
true.
who these people are. These few people under 1 or 2% of the statistic.
That's like
Who are
asking, you know, where are all the TV ratings coming from? Who are these 9 and 10 say this or that? You know, it's just like, where are they pulling from? I'm not contributing to any of this.
Yeah, probably. You're contributing to the vector.
See, the way that I see it is I tell people what to think, and that's how they think, which feeds right back into me. So whatever I do, regardless of how scummy it is, I probably keep a pretty high popularity rating.
Wait a minute. Benjamin, did you hear that? Does that actually mean that all listeners and watchers of the Lord Herald are his slaves? Exposed.
Otto, you don't laugh up
Oh my
there.
God.
You and all your interns.
Let's see if there's a good general I can send after him.
You know,
Everyone
I
else
heard
on the bandwagon.
I heard imperial slaves get paid higher wages than you pay your interns, since they only get coffee.
See, this is what's great about being a Lord Herald down there, is I could just be like, that's not true, and you could be like, it doesn't matter.
Lord Herald got exposed quickly. Go to the
Yeah, you're right.
messengers.
You know
Take
what?
their
That's fine.
devices before they get
It doesn't. It doesn't matter, Tech. It doesn't matter. I
It
control
does
the
matter.
media.
Yeah, you have more slaves than I.
You can
This
accuse
has been
me of
Lord
whatever
Harold
you want.
Kittens.
I love how quickly we managed to move the chat from three
Yeah.
areas to everyone pointing fingers at each other. It's lovely.
I just like joined the chat
Hey,
and then
that's-
slavery came up. I think I might be first.
You know, that's true imperial behavior here.
Absolutely.
If we're not each other's throats, are we even imperialing right? I don't think so.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I think that's actually how a lot of patronage systems are kind of designed to keep people at each other. And a lot of a lot of positions under like a despot, maybe not a despot, what's the word? Under an authoritarian regime, they're always going to be set up so that the underlings are kind of going after each other, so that they don't actually go after the despot themselves or the authoritarian regime head person,
Yeah, that makes sense.
the
Kevin.
authoritarian regime headmaster.
And you know how we settle our disputes? We chuck diamonds at each other hard enough it kills someone.
Kevin,
I shoot mine out of a revolver.
What
Oh.
Tech?
Kevin, you should have watched Drew Varga's last Lord Tour stop in Arcana because he perfectly explained how Imperial Society works.
Oh yeah, how do you perfectly explain it?
With his mouth, I guess.
Yeah, he made sound, and the sound is
Does
actually
it-
called words, and
Does it
words
does it
form sentences.
is it
It was
significantly
encoded into
different?
data and sent over the internet.
Was it significantly different than what we do here?
No, it's exactly. It was like a definition of Prismatic Imperium.
Which means we do something right.
The things don't only have to work as
Hey,
intended, but
I
also
have-
look beautiful.
I have slaved away myself trying to move this group with our roleplay to represent what Frontier established as imperial society, as opposed to what people assume it is when they pledge to Princess Aisling Duval.
Yeah, perfect. Not Benjamin. You excluded
I
him.
mean, I think the thing about Benjamin is that he thinks Imperial Society is one way because he doesn't know any better. Like, I think that Imperial Society is very different than the hellhole that he thinks it is. And I think that it's been established in lore. But that's something else. That's something else entirely, though.
You know, Drew also explained how Imperial slavery truly works and how Imperial slaves are actually being treated. For example, if you have a slave and if you treat it like dirt, it's not honorable. You're getting
Right.
disliked. Friends push you away. You're actually losing reputation. So you can't actually treat them bad, because otherwise you treat your reputation and yourself bad. It would hurt your entire family.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I think
just-
I've said that a lot before
Yeah.
too. You know, with the story where we had a bunch of freed slaves that were just dumped here on Cubio, ending up being a part of the enemy, the syndicate force, just because they didn't know how to cope with all of their liberties being torn away from them, those liberties being their slavery. So it's kind of backwards, but I think that's one of the things that really shines with Aisling Duval as a character, is that all of the characters in Power Play are shades of gray in terms of morality. And you know, is slavery good or bad? It is a discussion that is supposed to continue to go on, and there isn't supposed to be an obvious right course of action for abolishing it. Otherwise, it would have already happened.
So Benjamin is actually contributing to the syndicate's recruitment. Wow.
Well, it's certainly. I mean, that's kind of why he got pulled into their agenda in the first place. He was a perfect candidate.
By Arcana.
How did we get here?
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Tyron's going to be calling for slaves on
shut
his,
up
on
now.
his ship.
Now I remember what I wanted to say. I will, of course, put the links to the last 2 Laughter shows that happened with Joraga into the description too. So if you want to catch up on these, you can do this. It's always a recommendation if you're interested in Elite lore.
You can actually see my ships in these streams.
If you pay attention and know what to look for, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, you can't oversee a huge cutter in your face.
But we have reached the hour, and with that, it is about time to close the show. Thanks, everyone. It's got very crowded at the end here. I love that. Thanks, everyone, for being here and chatting with us, and I hope we will see everyone next time. And that has been it for the Congress. You will now listen to the outro, and I have to do shameless self-advertisement here. If you like the outro music and you want the extended version of it, because I've been asked to make an extended version of that, I will also put the link to that in the description. Thanks for chatting with us. See you next time.
See ya.